Welcome to Yelling Into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm Tevin. I'm joined as always by Scott. But guys, I have to tell you, unfortunately, Scott has locked me in the dungeon with nothing but like boss videos for the next week. So I need food. I need help. I am blinking twice. I do need help. So please call assistance.
Have you watched every single video for every single raid boss that exists yet?
I have watched every single Dratnos video.
Well, that is not
boss that they tested.
That is not what I asked. So get back in there and get to work. We got a raid.
I am looking forward to seeing like the last boss mechanics. I will say next week, because I think the Ready Check Pull guide is gonna be primarily going off like the dungeon journal is normally what they do.
They released one I think yesterday that was just like a dungeon journal guess guide, and it was pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wanna see it in action, so I'm hopeful that they'll release a video early on next week. They're normally pretty good about that. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, once they get actual footage of the actual fight. Holy shit, man! It's here. It's all happening.
It's here. Class changes are here. Stories here. Freaking cutscenes are here.
Yeah,
there's so many awesome cutscenes and Zalateth and everything just everywhere. I don't know. It's awesome. This zone, the atmosphere is great. I don't really have any issues outside of the servers. Like the servers in Undermine specifically seem like they are struggling a little bit. I don't know if it's the drive server or the drive system. I don't know if it's because there's so many people, but in Undermine specifically, it seems like the game is still a little bit slow.
Yeah, I was experiencing that patch night when I played a little Tuesday night, but today I didn't experience any lag at all. So
I got on right at about 5 p.m. Eastern and was playing around a little bit, and it was still taking a second or two to pick up quests, but like abilities and stuff were fine. It was really just like quest accepting, quest completing that was any slowdown at all.
Okay.
That being said, we have to talk about everything in this patch as like a whole, because man, has it felt like one of the best, if not the best content patches in I don't even know how long.
Yeah, and the shit that we like isn't even out yet.
Exactly. Like the car thing is cool. It's thematic. I love it. I don't know that I'm very good at it or that it's going to be something that I'm going to engage with a ton, but it's a goblin car and a goblin themed city and a goblin themed like content patch. I don't know how much more on theme you could be.
Yeah.
That being said, I do want to talk a little bit about obtaining the car. I don't know what it was about it, but like I got like absolutely completely fucking lost until a green arrow just like appeared over my head at some point and like started telling me where to go. So yeah. I don't know if you ran into that or not.
I mean, yeah, I think that the Undermine as a zone is chaotic and confusing and very easy to get lost in. But like, I think that's all by design. And, you know, I saw a lot of complaints about the drive system. I was like perusing the internet today and kind of seeing people's overall reaction to the patch. And a lot of people were reacting to the drive system saying like, this is fun, but like, you can't really ever get top speed. Like there's this, it's a city. It's too crowded. There's not enough like straightaway areas and I'm like, yes, I agree. But again, I think that's part of the design. Like they made it too fast for the zone it's in.
Yeah.
But that's goblins. Like that's like, I wonder if at one point they just like, they had this idea and we're testing it. And it's like, someone was like, it's too fast. You can't control it. You end up just running into things and bouncing off things. And someone was like, no. That's perfect actually. And that's what I love about it is yeah, I'm not good at it. It's not, I don't steer it well. I run into things constantly. I tried to do a couple of the races and just did abysmally. And do I think I'm going to get better at this thing as I go? Yeah, probably, maybe a little bit, but it's silly and goofy and goblin. And that's everything that this patch is. And it's awesome. It's awesome.
I imagine the game design meeting where they're like, oh yeah, it's super hard to control, yada, 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 everything that you were just saying. And then they're like, okay, hear me out. We add drifting. And then just like all of that explodes. I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds so funny to me.
Yeah. Oh my god, that's great.
Um, I do want to say that there seems to be a lot going on in this patch, like a lot of side things that you can do, and I think precedented amount of side quests and little adventures you can go on. Like I opened up my map. I haven't done any of the side quests yet, and there is just exclamation points everywhere.
Yeah.
Like absolutely everywhere. So I don't know if that's more than is normal or if it's just because it's in such a condensed area, but it feels like there's so much.
Yeah, I mean, there's. I think you're right. It's just I feel I don't know what's like the size of the zone. It feels like a very small zone. Maybe it's just because we have this incredibly fast car that can get from one side of it to the other in like literally 10 seconds. But yeah, it feels like everything is very compressed and put together. So yeah, I have done a fair amount of the side quests. I was looking at the meta achievement for all the side quests. I think I've got maybe a third of them. They're very fun. They're very silly. And I'm enjoying them. But it does feel like there's a lot. It does. Like I didn't realize there's a point in the story quest. Spoilers are, I guess, where you go to a BFA zone that I'm blanking on the name of right now because I didn't play that expansion. That was a fun little jaunt over there, but then like I didn't realize there's like dailies and side quests that send you back to that place. And like that's all really cool. That's all really cool, and it just everything is the fun and funny, and like I mean one thing that sometimes we get so caught up by those exclamation points, but if you just like slow down, get out of your car, and just like walk around the city a little bit, you'll see things everywhere. Little pockets of story and lore and flavor are just everywhere. It's so cool.
So I guess to finish off the news section, because I guess we're going a little too deep into Undermine right now. We'll get into it in a second. But the other thing that Scott and I want to talk about is the Mythic Plus the game, otherwise known as Fellowship. We talked about it a little bit in the past on this podcast. It was right around the time The War Within was coming out ish.
Mm-hmm.
But it was under NDA at that point. We didn't really know what we could say. We didn't know what we couldn't say. We did play the closed beta, and there is an open beta happening for that right now. So if you want to check out the game that we're going to talk about a little later, it is essentially Mythic Plus stripped down to just Mythic Plus. And that's on Steam right now. It's called Fellowship. It's open beta for the Steam Next Fest. I think it goes until sometime in March.
I think it's Monday. I think Monday is the last day, Monday or Sunday.
So definitely check it out if you want to. Unfortunately, you're only going to have a few days left once this podcast releases. But if you want to see it, it's pretty quick to get into. It's pretty quick to climb up a few key levels, see if you like it. And again, we'll talk about it a little bit more later on to give you a better idea of kind of how we're feeling in this first open beta, but I think like third beta for them, third or fourth.
I don't actually know. I mean, I just know the ones that we participated in.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was one like between this and the one we did. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else besides just diving into the main segment that you wanted to add, Scott?
No, I mean, it's just an exciting time, right? Like we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but the race is next week. The raid is next week. The season is next week. Like everything's happening. It's a, you know, there are definitely lulls in this game, and we have been in one for quite a while now. But it's all back. It's all happening, and I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. So, well, let's dive in. We're going to talk about the story a little bit. So, spoilers to come most likely. I will do my best to be as spoiler free as possible, but I'm not going to promise anything. So, if you're worried about spoilers, I guess I'll try and put in the comments or in the description for the YouTube video, at least where we stop talking about story, so you can move on.
I mean, look, sure, let's do that. But also, like, the story is not going to win like a Pulitzer. Like it's good, but it's not like, oh my god, if you ruin the surprise of nothing. It's just it's a good story. It's enjoyable, but I don't think I don't know. Stop being so spoiler phobic, everyone. It doesn't matter.
For the main quests you can play through. I think there's 5 chapters.
4.
Is there 5 or 6 chapters? You can play through 4 of them.
There are 6 total. You can play through 4.
So that is broken down into 2 decently sized chapters, a very quick third, and then another decently sized 4th chapter currently.
Yeah.
I didn't even know I completed the 3rd chapter is how fast that one went for me.
Mm-hmm.
So really this boils down into chapter 1 is you getting to Undermine. Chapter 2 is figuring kind of out what's going on. Then you go, like Scott said, you go somewhere else in chapter 3. And then for chapter 4 is kind of culminating to what is going to be the raid. And then the story will continue from there. And that's kind of how it's broken down. I just have to say, I don't know that this is true. This is 100% speculation, but this really feels like it has like the first thing that Metzen has been like fully a part of for me. I don't know if like, I don't want to take away from the composers or the writers or the artists at all for this content patch, because all of that is absolutely phenomenal and amazing. But this truly feels like the first thing that Metzen has like come back and been like fully a part of.
Yeah, very possible. I don't know if we know exactly the breakdown of that, but I think it's fine to have that assumption. I mean, I think just like there's this thing that happens sometimes in storytelling and just creation in general, where like if you come across like one really good core of an idea, then like it just empowers every other piece of it. And I really think like when you look at this patch and every part of it, from the story to the atmosphere to everything, that's like the origin of all this is someone had a really good idea of let's do Undermine. We're already underground for this War Within stuff. Let's do Undermine. And it's just like everyone just had 1,000 great ideas. Once you gave them that, once you put that on a platter for them, it's just like, oh, well, I've got 1,000,000 different things I could do. And that's what it feels like. You know, it's you know, from a story perspective, we kind of leave off the War Within story. Xal'atath has gotten what she wanted, and we've defeated, I don't even remember the name of the spider lady. That's how
Answer.
There we go. That's how not a thing she was in my mind. We killed her and she's dead. And it's interesting because like when the Undermine portion of this was announced, you're like, well, what is this going to have to do with Xal'atath? And I think it's through the 4 chapters we've seen, of course, I think it's actually pretty clever how it worked in, because I guess, yeah, spoiler warning, the Dark Heart, which was the device that was made during Dragonflight, that Iridikron went back in time for, was damaged in the fight with Xal'atath at the end of the campaign in the beginning of the War Within, and so she's gone to the Goblins to help fix it. And so that's kind of what the story of Xal'atath's entrance here is, that Xal'atath has teamed up with the Goblins, and is getting her Dark Heart repaired, but also giving them black blood weaponry and things like that. And that's why Gallywix has all these cool tech that we're going to see in the raid. It's all black blood infused things. It's fun and it's simple and quick. And I kind of like, so the end of chapter 4 is the Ethereals have taken the Black Heart thing away from the boss. And so like, it's interesting to me. I don't think, and we'll see with these last 2 chapters, I don't think, like, I think Xal'atath's portion of the story is kind of done now. It's like, she made a deal with this guy to get this thing fixed. He fixed it. He was going to keep it from her because he's a goblin. And then the Ethereals came and took it anyway. And then they're gone now. They're left. And what we're left with is the city that we've spent the entire storyline kind of getting to know and getting to understand the characters and understand how the characters are kind of been enslaved and taken over by this evil ruler. And the raid is not to save the universe. It's not to get the Dark Heart back. It's not to defeat Zalateth or foil Zalateth's plan. The raid, it seems like, based on these first 4 chapters, is just we need to free these people from their evil leader. So, it's called the Liberation of Undermine. That's the name of the raid. So what we're going to be doing is just taking down Gallywix. That's it. It's not for some greater, larger, huge story purpose. We're just like, this guy's bad. He's punishing these people. He's cruel and awful. And the people of Undermine are suffering. So let's go get him. And I dig it. I like it. I like it as like that every patch in this thing doesn't have to be like, it advances the story slowly, yes, but it doesn't have to be like a to be continued in the raid itself. That the raid gets to be a complete story, that Undermine itself gets to be a complete story from beginning to end. I'm for it.
Right. So here's my thought, and this might be out of left field, but when we first saw, and again, this is getting way more spoiler heavy, so when we first saw the ethereal that took the thing from Gallywix, before he saw Gallywix, you saw his name as like something ethereal thief or something like that.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if he's stealing it for the ethereals, not necessarily for Zalateth.
Yeah, I mean,
and we'll see.
You're absolutely right that like the assumption that the characters in the story run with is that the ethereals are just working for Zalateth and they're just taking it back for her. But yeah, maybe that's not true. I don't know.
I'll be interested to see what ends up coming of that. I don't think, however, that is, like you said, I don't think that's going to be a part of this story. And I think that's a good thing. Like, I like having arcs in a story where it does not constantly feel like we have to save the world or else. And it feels nice. Like, obviously that's still happening in the background, but it feels nice to have a little bit of a break for that in the Liberation of Undermine.
Yeah, just like fucking pull this dude's statue down. That's the goal. That's the goal for this raid, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, exactly. I do. So the one thing that has like stuck out to me, and maybe this is kind of segueing into the next part that we have here. So I have this broken down into like story, atmosphere. Then I want to talk about the drive system, and then something else a little bit after that. But what's interesting to me is it seems like going into this, we have the like cartels, right? So we have Venture Company, which is huge, been known throughout World of Warcraft since vanilla.
Yeah.
We have other goblin cartels that are popping up. We have new leaders for the cartels. We're actually working with Venture Company on some things. And it's nice to see these things come full circle. And it's also nice to see that we have a world in which all of these goblins have like kind of collected, but also collectively hate. It's a very interesting place to be. It, like I said earlier, it is very visually stunning. It is very 110% goblin-esque. There's trash everywhere, but there's also lawn chairs for you to like hang out in the non-existent sun and breathe in all of the smoke and smog fumes that you want to. And I'm just 100% here for the atmosphere. It really brings me back to how I felt the first time I flew in and I saw the giant crystal underground, and like that went from light to dark, and I don't know, they've continued to wow me throughout the World Within's like environmental design, which is absolutely amazing.
I completely agree. And it's like, I think this is a hard lift for me personally, because I've been playing this game for so long and have like, have a real been there, done that attitude towards questing and zone stuff. You know, like this is something I need to get through. I got to do it and then move on. And the game has kind of forced me not to, like, especially as compared to Dragonflight, because Dragonflight was a very popular expansion. It was kind of the writing of the ship in a lot of ways, but like from a zone design perspective, I didn't really think Dragonflight was that cool. Like, yes, dragonflying was awesome, and just flying around the world was great because of dragonflying, but like I never really felt like the zones had a flavor or a story that really captivated me in that expansion at all. And this is just not the case in this one. That like, with the exception of maybe the Ringing Deeps, like every single one of these zones has wowed me, has made me want to like look and find things and explore. And obviously this feeling goes away. Like in 4 weeks, we'll be not talking about this at all. Maybe in 1 week, we will not be talking about this at all. But the fact that we get to talk about it and the game has pulled me into it, and I find myself reading quest text. I find myself wondering what's going on. I find myself just enjoying these characters and this place that they live. It's really great, and it definitely feels like they had a lot of fun with this. And it's working. It is 100% working.
I will say the one thing that they have done consistently in this expansion, and it has worked, is they have used verticality so much. Like
Yeah.
there are so many buildings in Undermine specifically that have 2, 3, even 4 floors that you go up. There's NPCs on every level. You can talk to people on every level. Obviously, they started this in Dragonflight when you went underground into the caves. But now we have the Ringing Deeps, which is an entire underground area. We have, I guess we have more than one underground area in War Within. But
yeah, careful. That guy
like,
that really hates caves is going to swoop in.
They are using verticality so much to their advantage, and it's working. It's working because it's allowing, like, you have this actual feeling that Undermine is this like super dense, compact area of just mass population of goblins without it having to be this huge sprawling, like, takes them months and months and months to develop kind of space.
Yeah.
Because it's all kind of stacked on top of each other. Not to say they didn't take months and months to develop it. They most certainly did, based on how much tiny little things and environmental storytelling are here and there. But it allows them to do that, right? They don't have to figure out terraining and everything like that. And that's been great.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing I can say about it is it does feel like a city. I think the only minor complaint I have about this, and I completely understand why, like, just technologically they can't do it, but it does kind of bum me out that War Within is this very clear, like, transition down further into Azeroth. You start in the Isle of Dorn, and you dive down into the Ring Deeps, further down into Hollowfall, further down into Ashkahet. And I would have liked the content patches in this expansion to further that feeling of you're continuing to dive down deeper and deeper and getting close to the center of the earth. And the fact that Undermine is just like you hop on like a rocket and move to a loading screen into a different area, and it's not really physically connected to the rest of the world, is a little bit of a bummer. Like, I understand the reasons for it. As you said, like, there's no flying in the zone. There never will be flying in the zone. So, like, they can't really just have that smooth, seamless transition like they did with Zarela Caverns or things like that. But it is a little disappointing.
It is. It is a little bit. I will say the one thing that I like about this, though, is they kind of took with that and ran with it a little bit, because the way that you come in is you come into this like almost train depot-esque area.
Yeah.
And then there's like bodyguards and stuff like that just all around, and people that you eventually end up having to like bribe to let people in.
Yeah.
And then there's other rockets as well that take you to places. So they
Yeah.
did well with it, but I 100% agree with you. I would prefer to be able to walk into this zone.
Yeah.
And you can't really do that.
And at the risk of like proving Blizzard right, the fact that we can't fly in here is absolutely enhancing the experience for me. Like 100%. Like I like, it is not just because they developed this new car and wanted to force you to use it that we can't fly in this zone. They get to design this zone knowing that no one will ever be able to fly here. And it allows, like, I mean, I like flying. I love the convenience of flying. I've appreciated it in this game ever since it was introduced. But inarguably, it does drastically change how you interface with the world and the quests and the stories and the feel of traversal. Like, it just does. And I feel like this is a great compromise where, you know, sometimes the frustration of no flying in a zone is that it just feels like it takes forever to get from point A to point B. This, we don't have to worry about just flying over everything, but we have our goblin car, so we can get from point A to point B really quickly, but also point A and point B are filled with this cool stuff that we kind of have to look at because we're not just flying over it. I think it's a great compromise.
I do 100% find myself still getting lost in the city, though. And I don't know how long that's going to take to go.
I don't know if it ever will. And I mean, maybe, I don't know. Like, it is definitely confusing with the verticality of the different levels of the areas, and you think you're going to one place and then you just run into a wall, or you turn into a corner that really is not made for you to use the car through, and you just get stuck over and over again. But again, I like, maybe not necessarily by design, but a happy accident that reflects the mood and the tone of the patch is absolutely what it is.
100%. So, okay, Scott, this is one thing that I have you to thank for. And it has been by far, I think, the most enjoyable part of this patch for me.
Okay.
The music. The music is so good. It is so good. And I normally have music on, but Scott messaged me and he was like, make sure you turn your music up.
Yeah.
And I did. And man, it is like, it's awesome because it is still composed well. It's still WoW's composers. They're always amazing at making music, but it's this step away from like the big orchestral, like walking into Stormwind and just hearing the like all the horns going and everybody singing and everything like that. And like that is a breathtaking thing. But going down in here and then just the entire vibe shifting, you're getting like saxophone and this
So
like kind
many
of like smooth
saxophones.
jazzy music. It is awesome. It is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I normally don't play with music on, but I do make it a habit of every new zone to just throw the music on for a little bit just to hear what it is. And yeah, I haven't turned it off in the zone yet. It's great. It's really great. It's really fun. It fits the vibe perfectly. It's just delightful. It's just like that's delightful is like the word of the day with me right now. Like every bit of this is just absolutely delightful.
I will say, if you don't play with music and you want to give it a shot, definitely do it in this zone.
Mm-hmm.
It is pretty specific to the Undermine zone. I think even leading up to Undermine is the like normal ringing deeps music.
Mm-hmm.
But once you actually get into the city, definitely turn on the music, take a listen. It is awesome. The last thing that I really want to talk about with kind of like the feeling of the patch is I want to say I love the fact that everything is so above and beyond Goblin, like everything. And it 100%, like I was super sad to see we were doing Junkyard again. Workshop again.
Mm-hmm.
I was sad to see Motherlode be one of the dungeons. But man, does it just fucking make sense that we're doing Workshop and Motherlode? Like, it just, everything about it, like, it has turned my disdain for those dungeons, at least currently, away from disdain and into like, this just fits. I don't know who made these decisions, but it fits. It's awesome and A+.
Yeah. And the same thing with Theater of Pain, a notoriously goblin-focused dungeon. Wait,
I don't know why Theater of Pain's in there.
I
think it's in there just because they couldn't do both Mechagons again.
Yeah, they didn't want to do both Mechagons again, and they didn't have anything else they could pick. And it's like, we'll do this one. Yeah, it doesn't really. The only thing I can kind of make sense is Theater of Pain as a very like Colosseum atmosphere, and that there is a big kind of goblin Colosseum where the Crucible of Carnage fight will occur in the raid. So maybe that's, if you squint, like that's what that's what they were going for there. I don't know. Yeah, I agree with that. It's all great. And like, look, I'm not like a guy who like loved the goblins. Like I wasn't like being like, oh hell yeah, goblin shit. That was not ever really my thing. But man, the game's making it my thing. Cause yeah, it's just fun. It feels very Warcrafty, I think, is the most important part. There is, and maybe that's, what you talking about. Maybe this is Metzen's influence back again. There was definitely this feeling amongst people that have been playing these games for a long time that at some point in World of Warcraft, it stopped feeling Warcrafty. Like Dragonflight, again, fun expansion. The storyline in Dragonflight doesn't feel like I'm playing Warcraft. Like if you showed this to the me that was playing Warcraft 2 on Battle.net when I was a kid, I would be like, what is this? But if you showed me this goblin shit to that person, I would be like, yep, that makes sense. That is a natural progression for this world. to make something like this.
Yeah, the other part that I want to say too is I feel like what they have been doing recently is what they need to continue to do. Like, for example, when you go into Hollowfall and you have these like paladin-esque people who are like lost expeditions of people who have been stuck down here for a while, they just like fully leaned into that.
Yeah.
And now with this, they fully leaned into the goblins. And as much as like Ringing Deeps is probably my least favorite zone, it 100% makes sense with the thought process of what the Earthen are between the Ringing Deeps and the Isles of Dorn. Like those pair completely perfectly with each other with what the Earthen are supposed to be. And they've been really doing this thing where they are just like 110% leaning into what the zone's supposed to be, what the story around it's supposed to be, and it is working. And I want them to continue to do that because when we were in Dragonflight and every zone was supposed to be meant for everything outside of maybe the Azure, I can't think of the actual name of it, but the place with the Tuskar. But even that zone, like that was like Grizzly Hills 2.0 meets like Tuskar coast area.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like
you want to know why you can't
have,
remember what
like,
the zone is called? You want to know why? Because it sucked.
but like that's what I'm saying is like I want them to continue to just completely lean into what they're going for. Like Hollowfall is the very perfect example of this, where it's this constant struggle between light and dark. You have the like paladin people, and then you have the shadow monsters that they're fighting against, and like that is what the zone is. That's just what it is, and it's perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. They need to lean into the gimmick and the affect as much as possible. Like I think we traverse these zones so much that like and so quickly now that like I wonder if like part of Dragonflight is like an old school method of zone design that they don't really need to do anymore, where like everything has to be kind of divided and pocketed regionally. And like the zones, even though the Dragonflight zones were some of the biggest zones the game has ever done, like we move through them so quickly now that if we divide everything and pocket everything off regionally in a zone we're flying through, the kind of end result is that the zone itself doesn't feel like it has any specific flavor to it. Because you're absolutely right. That zone was the Blue Dragon area of the Dragon Isles. It had the Tuskar, which are great, and it had that little Tuskar area. It had the Blue Dragon area, but it didn't like. There was no feel of that zone, I don't think. And I think that's true with all of the Dragonflight zones. I think maybe like I'm trying to remember the names of the zones now, but I can't because the Onaran Plains was the Green Dragon one, right? That one I think had a little bit more because I think the Centaur were such a dominant part of that. Like that was the Centaur zone essentially, and so like that kind of worked for that. But overall I think you're right that we just need to like lean in, come up with a theme, a concept, an idea that is defining to the zone, and then everything in that zone should feed into that in some way, because that's what Undermine is. That's absolutely what Undermine is.
Well, and it's also going to be to the detriment of like me, for example. Like I hated the Nerubian stuff. Like it was awesome to look at, but I kind of don't like the Nerubian architecture. I don't like the layout of the cities. I don't like a lot of the things about it, but it was the Nerubian zone.
Yeah.
It was 100% what it was. All the architecture was that. All the NPCs essentially were Nerubians. And they really just leaned into it. So I want to see them continue to do that. But as far as like atmosphere goes, they're continuously nailing it in the War Within. I want to see them continue to do that because if the foundation of the atmosphere and the raids and everything like that is good, then they can kind of ride the coattails of that while they're fixing some of the other systems. And
I mean, like, can you imagine if Mythic Plus and the raid were awesome this season? Like, because I don't even remember, like, we and everyone went into War Within so incredibly positive because the story and zone and leveling experience was as great as it was. And then that goodwill kind of crashed down to earth very quickly when people were struggling against the complications of Mythic Plus for that season.
Mhm.
Can you imagine? Once again, it seems like we're riding a high. This is a very popular choice, very popular zone, very popular story, and we can ride that into a good season with a great raid. Like
Yep.
that would be really good for the game. So I am very much hoping that's what we can do here.
Well, speaking of riding, Scott, we need to talk about the car a little bit.
Okay.
We've kind of hinted and poked around at it a little bit. I don't think that this is going to be something that we're going to go extremely in depth in, because really all it is it's a mount. It has its own specific mechanics, and yeah, just play around with it, see if you like it or not. And at the end of the day, if you don't like it, you can still use any other ground mount, and the city's not very big. It's not
Yeah.
a big deal.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first? I'll let you go first.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, I like how snappy this feels. Like you get in, and I haven't figured out if there's any other way to summon this car outside of the extra action button.
You could just pull that down on a hotkey.
Okay.
It's not actually, so it's weird because I have my extra action button on my mouse bound to something unique for it, and I kept hitting it and it wasn't working. And it's not actually the like extra action button. It's a separate button that is just being popped on your interface. You can just grab it and pull it into a hotkey if you want.
Gotcha. Well, it feels snappy. You hop in the car and then you press W, and you are like, you're going pretty quickly initially, and then you only get faster the more you go.
Mm-hmm.
And for anybody who hasn't figured it out yet or doesn't read the tutorial text, if you press spacebar, you can start drifting. And that is a game changer.
But only if you're already turning.
Yes. If you're holding W, you will jump, which is interesting and helpful, but also kind of weird.
I wish they had put drifting and jumping on different keys. That's the only thing I could say. Because it does, sometimes you want to jump and you end up drifting. Sometimes you want to drift and you end up jumping. Again, I am not good at the car yet, so I think maybe over time I will just get better at it and this complaint will fade away. But I've definitely encountered issues with jump and drift being on the same button.
The other thing that I did notice when you go to the like upgrade menu for your car, so it seems like there's going to be unlockable things that you can do for the car, and you can swap pieces out and whatever, but there's already something unlocked for people who feel like it's too fast. There is an engine you can swap over to lower your top speed.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to take a look into that if you feel like that is like your main concern with
I will never do that. I will continue to crash right into the wall. I would never do that.
So there's kind of two issues that I've heard, at least in our group of friends so far. And one of them is one that you brought up, Scott, where you're kind of ingrained in this game to have right click held down and move with your camera at all times, always.
Yeah.
And doing that with the car it works, but it's also kind of weird. So almost like taking your hand off the mouse and just playing with your keyboard is like kind of a better way to interact with this system. At least you and I have found.
Yeah, that's the most success I've had with driving so far, is that, positioning your camera right behind the car, taking your hand off the mouse, just using WASD and space. It works well. So yeah, but it is like I find myself not thinking about it and just having my hand on my mouse and holding down, and it like it messes with everything a little bit because you're like trying to steer with the D key, but then also you're turning when you move your mouse at all, and it messes it up a little bit.
The other complaint that I've heard is it takes a while to turn. So if you do crash into something, you have to like turn to get out of it. I don't really have a fix for this. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Just get better at driving. Don't crash. But the only thing that I will say is, just like in an actual car, if you back up going the other way and then you drive forward going the way that you want to go, it will turn you quicker. So
this has been How to Drive a Car with Tevin.
But those have really been the only two complaints. I mean, outside of the lag, like, I'm not even going to mention it anymore because like that's just part of a new content patch. It's part of new things. It's going to happen. That's really been like the only complaints I've heard. Like, it seems like pretty much everybody in our kind of sphere has enjoyed the story for the most part.
Yeah.
Everybody enjoys the atmosphere, enjoys the music, and likes all the side quests, likes the drive system. And so like, I don't even know that there's a ton that I can be super critical about. I don't
Yeah.
know. Is there anything that you want to be critical of?
No, I don't think so. I mean, here's what I'll say overall about Drive is I think it's a lot of fun, but it's also very clearly to me that this is a system that should just remain in Undermine. Um,
Agreed.
I like it's interesting, like comparing it to Dragon Riding. Like Dragon Riding was this thing where like the second you get your hands on it and do it, you're just like, oh, we should never do normal flying ever again. Like it makes no sense to ever do flying any other way other than this. It's fun, it's fast, it's intuitive. It just makes the game better. Drive, on the other hand, it's fun for where it is for the reasons we've talked about, but
Yeah.
I do not want all ground amounts to have this system going forward.
You don't want to be drifting your dinosaur?
I do not. I do not. Not just for aesthetic reasons, but just merely because I don't think it works. I just don't think it's going to work outside
Right.
of this place.
Well, I hope that we don't have to worry about that. I do. You and I were talking about it last week. Having some systems that are for specific reasons, I think is fine.
Yep.
And I think that this is one that should stay here and not leave.
I agree. Yeah. And maybe they'll look into more dynamic ground mounts in the future that can borrow some of the design philosophy from this thing, but it should not just be a carbon copy of this thrown into the other game.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. Well, I do have one thing that we need to talk about, Scott.
Okay.
That is a problem for me.
Okay.
And it isn't an 11-1 problem. It is a anytime that we have a new raid, new season problem. I hate this dead week. I know why there's a reason for it. And I know that it gives people a sense of like not having to be urgent and get everything done day one so that they can then go do the end game content. But it feels like such a tease to like, here's all the new stuff, but all the new stuff that you want to do end game wise isn't coming for a week. And yeah. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, it's really interesting because everything we've talked about for the last half an hour is stuff that is not the reason we play the game. Like the story, the music, the vibe, the zone, the questing, the mount traversal, all great in this expansion, or this expansion, yes, in this patch specifically, but that's not why we play World of Warcraft. And so, yeah, I agree with you. It does feel a little weird that we always do this thing where this new patch comes out and then week one you're like, okay, I've done the roughly 2 hours of story. I've even done like a bunch of side quests that have taken another additional 2 to 3 hours. But then I'm kind of just done with the game for this week, I guess. Okay, that's a little weird. I will say, so I'm really of two minds of this, because from a personal perspective, if Mythic Plus dropped the same day as this zone and the story, I just wouldn't do the zone and the story, like, because I would just be doing dungeons immediately and getting into that. So like the fact that the game builds this week in to essentially say to me specifically, you have time to read the quest text, there's no dungeons to do, slow down and enjoy the thing we built for you, Scott. The fact that it does that, I appreciate. But on the other hand, and this was a comment we've received a couple times in the past when we talk about how this is a game that very often protects you from yourself. I don't know if people need that necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I agree with that functionally as a design philosophy, like that we need to protect ourselves from our worst instincts. So I'm torn. I like it. I like that, like, for all the reasons I said. But yeah, it does seem a little weird that we time gate essentially everything that people do a week later for some reason.
Yeah. So the one big thing that I do want to say about this is, while this is something that I dislike, I don't think that this is something that needs to be removed or necessarily changed. It is like, I've said this countless times on this show, World of Warcraft does not need to be made for me. Like, not every aspect of this game needs to be perfect for me, and that's okay. So if this needs to be in the game to allow people who have less time to play than me able to interact with the systems and everything like that are coming out before they feel like they need to then be playing the catch up game of getting into Mythic Plus or getting into Raid. Perfect. Like that is completely fine by me. Like I said, the thing that it bothers me the most about is the patch comes out, they have class changes, they have new systems, they have all, like, we know the dungeons that are coming out, we know the majority of the raid bosses, if not all of them, and how they're going to interact, how the raid looks and the feel of everything. And it just feels kind of like a tease, like, oh, here you go. Oh, not really. Oh, here you go in a
Yeah.
week. And that's the like downside for me, because ultimately, Scott, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, and I'm sure you know this. I have played through the story. I'm going to do some of the side quests. I'm going to do some of the side things that are in the zone. And then I'm not going to play again until Tuesday.
Mhm.
Like, sadly, that's just what's going to happen because I can't do old dungeons. Mythic Zeros aren't out. I don't know about Heroics. I don't think that those are updated yet either. And so, like, there's nothing. There's literally nothing to do at endgame besides interacting with this zone.
Yeah.
And again, that's not bad, but that is how I am going to interact with it. It is going to cause me to do a little bit and then not play until next week, which is fine. That's fine. It's completely fine.
It is. It's also, I think the main problem I have, it like from a design perspective, is it's very clunky because like this week is just weird, right? So season 1, for all intents and purposes, ended Monday night. All crests got wiped out, flightstones got wiped out. You can't upgrade gear anymore. You can still technically run Mythic Plus dungeons that are Season 1 dungeons. You can still technically run Mythic Zero and Heroic that are Season 1 dungeons, but there's essentially no point to doing it anymore. And yeah, we have all this Season 2 stuff now. And like this has become especially more confusing when they've brought Heroic into like Heroic dungeons into the season pool now. Heroic dungeons with the key squish are now part of seasons. M0s are now part of seasons. M0s outside of the, like in old expansions, you could walk into the Rookery right now on Mythic and just do an M0 version of that, even if it wasn't in the rotation for Mythic Plus for that season. That's not the case anymore. The Rookery on Mythic just can't be done until the season starts.
Right.
And it does create this really kind of confusing and clunky misunderstanding, I guess is the word. Like we had a lot of our friends and guildmates that were coming back to the game after a long absence from it, and they're wanting to catch up, they're wanting to gear up as quickly as they can, and like they had an assumption that, you know, I know the Mythic Plus season doesn't fully start this week, but maybe I'll get to run some M0s or even some Heroics and get some catch-up gear because it'll drop Heroic equivalent of Season 2 level, which is an upped level. But no, it won't. It won't. And so those people that were really anxious and ready to start gearing up and to filling the gap between the end of the season and now, they don't have anything to do either. And they like all my, like the characters that I'm playing are sitting at like 638 right now. So like I'm good. I don't need gear. I'm good going into the next season. I'm fine. But a lot of people aren't. And now in this dead week, they can't even get upgrade the Season 1 stuff they had. Like that's a mistake I made, by the way. Like I figured the patch was going to come out, and yeah, you might not be able to, you're not going to be, I figured you wouldn't be able to get any Season 2 gear whatsoever. What I didn't figure was that the crests and stuff were going to reset on yesterday. And I had crests saved up to make a weapon for my Windwalker, a second offhand for my Windwalker, a 636 weapon. And I was just going to do it because like I had them, I was going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't because I was like, oh, well, I'll check my vault first to make sure I don't get a weapon in the vault. And then I'll craft it. Oh, no, can't do that. Can't do that, actually. And also the thing I got, like, that got in the vault, like, is Mythic Track 1 out of 6, but also cannot be upgraded beyond that. It's like, it's just a little weird and clunky what happens in these systems now, where the game is just arbitrarily like, sorry, you can't do these things. The patch is out. Yes. You're in the new zone. Yes. Everything's Goblin. Yes. But now you can't do these things that you want to do for a week. Because We want to help out the people that can't play as much. It does just feel weird.
Yeah, I don't get the point of turning off the old systems. I don't know if it's a technological thing that they're doing it for, but I don't think so because I want to say you've been able to have like I want to say in Dragonflight, I had charges of like the season 2 um oh shit, what's the thing called? The thing that turns gear into tier.
Catalyst.
The catalyst.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say I had like season 2 catalyst charges that I could put season 2 gear in and catalyze. But I also had season 3 charges when I got on one of my alts. I want to say that that was a thing.
It was. Well, by the way, something cool that they've done. I don't know if they've done this in the past, but you no longer have any season 1 charges of the catalyst, but everything's free season 1. So you can catalyze anything season 1 now for free. You don't need any of the charges. I mean, we haven't needed charges for a long time, but if you have like 20 pieces of gear you want to catalyze or whatever, you can do it all now. So that's cool, because one of the things that I never got on my monk, I never got the chest tier piece because I had a 4 piece with all the other 4, and I had a heroic slot that was good enough, and it was good stats, whereas the chest piece wasn't as good stats, so I just never got it. And there was a brief moment where it was like, oh shit, I lost completing that set. I can't complete that set now. No, I'm just going to take that chest I'm wearing now that the gear doesn't matter as much and just catalyze it into tier and have the set. So that's cool. But yeah, I mean, it is weird. I mean, there's always going to be these kind of weird breakpoints in a seasonal game where you have to eliminate currency or stop things. There's always going to be a date when one day this worked, the next day it didn't work. But it just feels in the system with this weak lag, as much as I enjoy it because it makes me enjoy pieces of the game I wouldn't otherwise. It's confusing. It's very confusing. Like, I can't tell you how many threads I saw on Reddit, on Twitter, how many videos I saw on YouTube of people just trying to make content to explain what's going to happen. Because like I would see someone like, what level gear heroic's going to drop tomorrow, and like 2 people would respond and they have completely different answers, and it's like, shouldn't this be something that's clear and understood for all players?
I definitely think it should be. I think that that's something that they can work on their messaging for. I do want to say that our prayers have somewhat been answered in the recent PR push that they were doing for Undermine.
Yes.
They did have very good interviews where, for example, the interview with Skarazard, they explained why certain decisions were being made. It doesn't have to be like, interviews don't have to be so accusatory, but like trying to coerce out why is almost more important than how do you plan to do things moving forward. Like, yeah. I feel like knowing the root of the cause is something that people overlook a lot of the time because they just don't like the way it interacts with them. They don't think about any of the other reasons that something might have been done one way.
Yeah.
And getting that information is so key. And it's why Scott consistently says he wants to know, like, how does Blizzard feel about X?
Yeah.
Because if they feel like it's doing well, then there's a reason they feel that way.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean,
that's
like,
the most important thing to me.
I completely understand how people get frustrated with this game and the decisions that the people making this game make sometimes. I get it. It's frustrating. I've been there myself. But like, they don't wake up in the morning and be like, what thing can we do to piss people off today? Like, they're consistently trying to make design choices that they feel are best for the game. They are wrong sometimes because they're human beings. That happens. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of very complicated reasoning and philosophy and design behind every single choice that they make. And getting to peek behind that curtain and see and understand that stuff, I think allows me to better understand what Blizzard wants this game to be. And I really like that stuff. I completely agree with you. There's been a whole big 11.1 PR push this last week. So we've seen a bunch of interviews with a bunch of different content creators. Some of them have been absolutely incredible. Some of them have been just like the worst interviews I've ever seen ever. Just terrible, terrible questions. Like you see the look on the Blizzard employee's face of like, can I just leave? Can I just turn off Zoom and get the hell out of here? But yeah, I mean, I think that is a shift in their philosophy, that they're trying to communicate in that way more, and to offer reasoning and examples and things like that. And I think that's good.
Awesome. Not to beat a dead horse here. See what I did there with the dead week. but anyways, I don't think that there's much to do here. Like, I wanted to put this in because it felt weird. You and I were talking about it. I was complaining about it, but then I was like, but actually maybe it's not that bad. And so I did want to just have like a point in the show where we could talk about it. Because I think that it's really it's a polarizing topic. Like, you either are going to enjoy the fact that you have additional time to do things, or you're going to absolutely hate the way that this is laid out. And I want people to just understand, it's something that I always push for. It's okay. It's okay if it's not for you. It's
Yeah.
only a week. It'll be okay. The season will come. You'll completely forget that this was a thing, and life will move on.
Yeah, and you know what you can do? You can go play Fellowship.
So for Fellowship, I want to start this off by saying I'm going to talk about this in a way at which Scott and I interacted with it in the previous beta, along with how we are interacting with it in this current beta, because they have made improvements and they have made design decisions. And I think that it's important to explain how the team's like mindset at least seems like it's shaping out,
Yeah.
and how they are trying to improve on things going forwards.
Yeah. So I think
that being said,
before we get, let's
go
just
ahead.
lay like the groundwork of what this is, right? So it is a 4-player team Mythic Plus game, essentially. You pick your heroes. There's the Holy Trinity. There's tank, healer, DPS, and you hop into the game immediately. There's no levels. You can just jump into dungeons, and you start in a +0 dungeon, and you work your way up. They have dungeons, which are 3 boss encounters that take about 30 minutes. And then they have adventures, which are 1 boss things that take 10-ish minutes. And so, yeah, it's kind of taking the MMO out of MMORPG and just building a Mythic Plus system that can be built from the ground up to only have to be balanced with itself, because there's no other parts of the game it has to balance with.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing that I want to talk about, Scott, is I want to talk about kind of 2 things. One, their beta timing, and how this has like, I don't know if they play World of Warcraft. I can only assume they do.
Almost certain. Like, look at the user interface.
But the timings for their betas are like perfect. Their first closed beta was in the lull period right before the War Within released, and it ended right around the time the War Within actually released.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the perfect timing, because they got the WoW refugees who had nothing else to do, who do like grinding Mythic Plus, to come in and play. I think that there have been a couple of betas between this and the one that we're currently in and the one that we initially played in. But this one now, it lined up with Steam's Next Fest, which is really a good thing as well, because that promotes up and coming games. So not only are they getting World of Warcraft players now, but they're also getting people who consistently peruse Steam and like to look at up and coming games.
Mm-hmm.
And this is right in a lull period too. Like, sure, it opened up on Monday, and on Tuesday the Undermine patch came out. But again, like you said, or like we said, there's a dead week here. There's not really much to do. You do the content in WoW, and then you can go play Fellowship for a week.
I think if they had to pick, they would have preferred Steam Next Fest to be last week than this week.
True.
So like they're, but yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, there's the sweaty Mythic Plusers have nothing to do this week and are probably going to be trying out Fellowship.
Mm-hmm. And so, talking about kind of what this was when we first looked into it, this was a game that kind of came on our radar because I think it was being floated around by maybe it was
I
Growl. I
think
don't know. It was
Growl, the
a
first video of it I saw, yeah.
Yeah, it was a WoW content creator talking about it. Um, and so Scott and I got looking, and we applied for the closed beta, and we both got in. And this game, it had the makings of being something that on paper would be right up Scott and I's alley. Like Mythic Plus without all the other bullshit, and then having a progression system that was perfectly catered to Mythic Plus and everything around that. And I will say the first time we played it, it felt like it was falling short on some of those progression aspects. You had like a level and you got XP for completing dungeons, but it didn't seem consistent.
It felt very
And it,
grindy in that, like, to get
yeah.
those level ups, you would have to run like the same key level over and over and over and over again.
hmm And then they had this weird where like there was always a timer and they had like specific levels. You could only do adventures and you could only do the longer content on other levels. And the matchmaking was kind of weird because it would put you in both adventure or dungeon. And so there was a lot of weird things. They've made a lot of improvements to this. So actually, the progression system is one of the things that I think that they've kind of really hit the nail on the head with. And so the way that you unlock both talents and new abilities now is by doing harder content, doing higher level dungeons. Now, there is one current major drawback to this in that it seems like if you switch a character, which is your class, you have to do things sequentially. So if you have a buddy who has unlocked all the way up to a +6 on their main, and then you swap over to something you have never played and you do a 6, you only get the reward for the +1.
Yeah.
And then if you do a 6 again, you get the reward for a +2. You don't get everything up to the +6. And I think that that's the one drawback to this. But I think that this progression system is like we were saying, it is perfectly tailored to a game at which is just about Mythic Plus.
Yeah.
This is great.
I agree. I did not like the XP system, and this feels a lot more fair. I also really like how the game with the progression system is kind of introducing concepts to you slowly. Like in a +0 key, there's no affixes. You just run the key, and then in a +1, they add threat to the game. So in +1, the tank just does so much more threat than any of the other characters that there's never, or +0 rather, there's never any chance that the tank's going to lose threat. And then the +1, healers and DPS now suddenly do, I think it's 30% more threat or something like that. And so suddenly threat management becomes a thing. Okay, that's in a +1. And then in a +2, the amount of damage that interruptible abilities can do goes up by a whole lot. And so the game's saying, you better interrupt those abilities or they're going to do more. And then like a +3, the amount of healing that healers do is reduced by like 25% because they're like saying, we were giving you bonus healing as you learn the game. Now we're taking that away. You're going to have to figure it out. Then they add the timer. I forget. And then they add new abilities for the bosses. And like, so it's just kind of in the first 5 levels of the system is like built-in tutorial without you even really realizing it. And then after that, they start introducing the curses, which are really what their affixes are. They're things that make the key harder. I'm gonna keep calling them keys, even though they're not keys, but they are keys. Yeah, I mean, I think this is really cool, and like kind of forcing you to progress through that system one step at a time forces you to learn not only your class but the systems of the game. I completely agree with you. There should be immediate catch up mechanic if you've already done these on one of your heroes and want to switch to another. It's very silly to have to make that step by step progression again. I think they'll change that. I really do. I think that's something
Yeah.
that they'll take feedback on and change it.
The other part of this is there is like that isn't the only system of progression, which is if that was the only system of progression, I think that I'd be more okay with this. But there's also a gear progression system and there is like a gem progression system where like you can slot gems into your gear which give you stats, and then once you reach like certain thresholds of stats, you unlock additional things on your character. And so those are what I think should be tied to the character. And I think that the like guardrail system where you have to like you progress through the dungeon levels to unlock your abilities and stuff like that. I think I'd be fine with it if you could do, like I was saying, where like if you did a 6, you got everything up to a 6. I don't think that they need to necessarily have it to where like you just get everything once you've done it once on one character. Um, but yeah, it's good. It's progressing in the right direction, and it's still not perfect, but it's a beta, so I don't anticipate it to be.
Yeah.
And there is a ton of feedback. Like their Discord has a slew of feedback coming in, and it's just awesome to see that people are actually trying things out and providing feedback, not just taking this as an opportunity to play the game early.
Yeah, I agree. I'm still uncertain on how successful this thing could possibly be long term. Like, I think it's going to do well. It feels to me like a thing that is probably going to be very popular every time there's a lull in World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Which I mean, if you're a game designer, that might be enough for you, right? Like that's like that's enough for us to get to make the game we want and survive. And so you'll
Mhm.
deal with that. I think it's going to be really interesting to see. There's been a lot of talk about. I think J.B has said this in the past. Like if Blizzard just ripped Mythic Plus out of World of Warcraft and just made Mythic Plus the game, I would quit World of Warcraft today. I would do that right away. And so I am curious how a game like this can actually function with all the other elements that make WoW successful torn away. Like, can a system like this support itself for an extended period of time without any of the other MMORPG elements, without any kind of specific attachment to character? Because I think we should say, like, the heroes in this, like, you don't get to like create your character and then pick a class. It's like the hero is a race class combination and they look a certain way. Everyone who's playing X hero will look like that. And I think they're going to have like a customization thing coming soon. I saw in
Yeah.
the little central area, but it still won't be like you're creating your character. It will feel less like an RPG in which this character is a representative of you. It's just
Mhm.
not that type of game. So will a game like this be able to survive without that kind of stuff? The other thing I'm really curious about is key population. So this game does not have depleting in it, right? There's nothing happens to you if you fail to time a key. You just, I don't think, I think you might even get the loot at the end. I think the only thing that failing to time a key does for you is you then can't unlock the next level of the key. If you fail to time a 12, you can't, the game system will not allow you to do a 13, I think. I'm curious what a season of this game looks like 10 weeks in, how many people are doing +2s, +3s. Like, if you are a person that comes late to the season or late to the game, how difficult will it be for you to find groups to do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. They have something that's somewhat built in for that, but I don't think it's going to be very effective in that they have like a quick play thing where you can select your desired key level, you can click quick play and it will find you a group. But if your search takes too long, then they will expand that key level that you gave them. I don't know if it's plus or minus, but I know that it definitely will go lower.
mm,
So if I put in like a 6 and it takes me, 5 minutes to find a group, I might get into a group for a 4.
sure.
And so like that might be kind of a built-in way to handle this, but there's also a checkbox right next to it to say strict search where it won't go below your minimum level. And I mean, let's be real. 99% of the population will likely end up having that checked if they want to use this
Yeah. Yeah.
system. So, again, I don't know. It's not the perfect answer. I think that that is going to be one of the major challenges they are going to have to overcome and try and figure out. It's the reason that Scott and I have, despite hating depletion, understood why depletion is in the game.
Yeah.
And it's really like trying to make sure that your player base is spread evenly throughout the system is a constant struggle that they're going to have, especially given the fact that you are getting stronger. And unless they do like a seasonal thing where they eventually reset your power, you're just going to constantly get stronger, which means even if you bash your head against a wall something like 100 times, you're getting gear for that every time. You will eventually get enough gear to overcome that if gear is the only blocker.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I think they have to do a seasonal model, not only for just like gear catch up things and leveling the playing field again, but also introducing new dungeons. Like this is something that they've got to. The expectation here from the Mythic Plusers that this game is obviously trying to win over is that roughly every 6 months we're going to get a new dungeon pool. And so Fellowship, can you keep up with that? How many dungeons are you going to have at launch? Right now there are 3 dungeons and 3 adventures, I think is the amount right now. But like how many are you going to have at launch, and how often are we going to get new ones and a new pool? Because we have high expectations for the rate of new content. And so yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a real challenge as well. But I like this game. I enjoyed my playing of this game. I played a healer I played a tank the first alpha, and I played healer this time around. Healing is very interesting in this game, Tevin. It is not like World of Warcraft at all. Damage is slow, and you have time to react to it. It was a crazy concept. Like I was playing the healer that is a hot healer, and I very quickly realized, and I think this I eventually probably won't be true. They'll probably get a direct heal at some point, but literally every single one of my heals is a hot. It's not just like you're a hot healer in that you put out hots, but also you have direct heals. Nuh-uh. Literally every single one is a hot. And so the WoW brain person in me was like, well, how the fuck am I going to do this? I have no, like, I'm not gonna be able to keep people up. But that's not how this game works. Like you see big AoEs happen and damage ticks down very slowly, and then you have time to spread your hots around and watch health tick up very slowly, and it is just totally different. And like I like healing, and I like World of Warcraft a lot, but healing has gotten a little ridiculous in that it is more and more becoming like Twitch gameplay where you have to just act instantly, or someone's gonna die. And so the idea of like reining that in and pulling that back and making it a little bit more casual and not even more casual, because I bet you at high levels this game does get extraordinarily difficult, but it's not like where there are so many defensives and so many cooldowns in a healer's arsenal that we have to kill people in 2 hits, or else the healer will just be able to keep them alive infinitely, which is the state of World of Warcraft right now. And again, this is the advantage of them getting to build a fresh system and build upon that fresh system. So I thought it was fun. But yeah, I mean, I think just we'll see.
Yeah. So I do have 2 things that I want to say that I would like to see them iterate on if they continue to do more betas. The first one is we need to have a larger pool of heroes to try. The first beta, there were 6. And in this beta, again, there's only 6. All they did was they swapped out one of the ranged DPS casters for a melee in this beta. So it's the same pool of heroes essentially, with one DPS swapped out. And I don't know if that's because they want more targeted testing. And if that's the case, this 100% makes sense. But I do think that we're going to need to see how things are interacting with each other. And eventually, if they continue to do betas that are this restrictive, people are going to kind of lose interest, I think, because there isn't enough to play around with. You can't check out the things that they've changed as much. So that is something that I would like to see them change going forwards.
Yeah.
Adding in more heroes for us to play.
How many heroes do you think the game should have on launch? Like, what is the number they should be shooting for?
I think that there needs to be more than 2 tanks and healers for sure. So I think that we should be shooting for somewhere in the realm of like 3 to 5 for tanks and healers. And then obviously there needs to be more than that for DPS. So if we just double the tank and healer number, probably somewhere in the realm of 6 to 10 DPS.
Yeah.
I think that would be safe.
Yeah, I think 3 tanks, 3 healers, and 8 DPS. What's that? That's 14 heroes on launch. That's a lot. That's a lot. But like, that, I mean, this is another thing where World of Warcraft has them, right? Is this like, we've got 20 years of experience. We've got all these different classes, all these different specs. and that is a thing that people like in these kind of games because they like hopping between and trying different things. And so yeah, I mean, is that achievable, or is the plan 2 healers, 2 tanks, and then maybe 4 DPS? Is that the plan? um
Yeah.
I think that hurts the game if so. I do.
I agree. And I think that they have to have more. There has to be more choice than that. Because if it's pick between one or the other, then one's always going to be better. The other one's never, ever, ever, ever going to be played.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the world at which we're going to live in. I also, I think that they have very good ideas when it comes to how they are designing these classes. They have a monk that has like a combo system. Awesome. They have like your stock standard tank, keep up a buff and you'll be okay kind of tank. And then for DPS, they have like a normal caster, which has procs and things that you spend. And then they had in the first beta, they had a caster that was like all dot focused. And now we have a melee hero, which is like, you don't just go into melee and start hitting things. I mean, you do, but they have this special mechanic of like a swing timer where you have one ability, which you want to queue up at the end of your swing timer every time to have like a harder hitting melee attack every single time that you would have an auto. And like, if they continue doing things like this, then I think that having a smaller hero pool will be okay because everything will feel way more unique.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is if everything feels so unique, you're going to pigeonhole yourself into some things just might not be fun for people. And having a smaller pool of things that they can try out means that they might just not like any of them.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest fear for the hero pool size for them currently.
Yeah, and I also think they'll need to release new heroes on a fairly steady basis. I mean, like, this is again, this is the tall order that I think this company has set out for themselves. If they want to make this a successful game long term that builds and maintains a community, new things are going to have to come out constantly, just constantly. That's just the name of the 100%. Game. But yeah, I think one complaint I have is I think the combat still feels a little floaty for me. I think it's a little bit better in this beta than it was in the alpha, but it's a little slow, and like I think the problem is when you've been playing World of Warcraft a lot, World of Warcraft is so responsive. So like, I'm not even talking about the quickness and the speed, because I think it was the case in vanilla too. It's just like, it was just a very the fighting battle engine of this game is so well designed and works so well that everything else pales in comparison to it. And so there was a lot of times where playing this game reminded me more of playing Final Fantasy XIV than playing World of Warcraft, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I want to also acknowledge that, like, I've only done like a +5 dungeon. I haven't locked all my abilities yet, and so maybe the game speeds up when you have more stuff to play with. But definitely healing felt similar to Final Fantasy healing. In you have only a couple buttons for damage, and then you have a couple hots, and then it's slow, it's deliberate. Like, cooldowns feel long. The GCD feels long. Feels like you're kind of fighting in a swimming pool sometimes. It doesn't feel like World of Warcraft.
Yeah. So here's one thing that I've been noticing, right? Like, the thing that I put down in our notes here is movement felt all right. WoW is still king in that department. And I don't even know what the reason for this is, because like, it isn't like movement feels bad. Movement does feel very snappy, and pressing my abilities, something happens. I almost wonder if what WoW does so right, even if it's so minimalistic, is they make the animations like, there's something about their art team and their animation team where like pressing a button just feels good. Like, Final Fantasy has extremely flashy, super cool animations, but sometimes those just fall short and they're just flashy for being flashy. Whereas like WoW, as the years have went on, even more so, has put this like weight and like grit into the animation style that they've done for abilities. And I really think that that is what helps out WoW to like bring the whole feeling together. Because at the end of the day, pressing D and moving right shouldn't really feel that different between any certain game, but it feels so much
So
more
does,
like
yeah.
cohesive in WoW. I don't know what the reason for it is.
I think you're right. I think it's just the animation and the animation style. I think it's just, yeah, there's like characters move quickly and responsively in WoW, but still feel like they exist in the world. But like, I don't know. I'm just like imagining the tank pushing right and like in Fellowship, and it just feels like you're just like, oh, like it just feels like there's just a little bit of like slower floatiness to it.
Mhm.
It's hard to say exactly because it's more of a feeling than an actual like anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly, if you haven't played WoW, this might not even be an issue to you. But I playing World of Warcraft and World of Warcraft being such the titan that it is in this genre, you are going to be hard pressed to do anything better than them with movement unless you figure out the secret sauce that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I like Final Fantasy and I think that they've done a lot of things right when it comes to like animations and class feel and stuff like that, they haven't even figured it out, in my opinion. Like, it still does not feel as good to execute your rotation in Final Fantasy to me as it does in World of Warcraft,
No.
which is crazy because the animations in Final Fantasy are so much more like anime and over the top. And you would think visually looking at it from an outside perspective that Final Fantasy would feel better. And to me, it just doesn't. It just doesn't. And I don't know why.
Yeah, I think I have enjoyed my time with Final Fantasy 14 a lot. We tend to talk about it a fair amount on this show. But I have at best tolerated the combat. Like that's like I like the game. I like a lot of the design decisions of the game. The combat is at its very best good enough to keep me playing, but not like it doesn't feel like this game. Yeah. So,
and that's like the closest parallel I can draw with Fellowship.
Yep.
Like you said, it feels more in line with Final Fantasy's combat than it does WoW, with the exception being their GCD is nowhere near as long, but they also don't have as many off global things. Like, really, the only off global thing that I personally have experienced in Fellowship is my interrupt, and outside of that, everything else is on global.
Yeah.
Um,
and I think that's okay. Like I don't know. Like I really hate that Final Fantasy has fallen into this rhythm of weaving OGCDs and GCDs. It just feels arbitrary and weird to me. Like I think it's important to have buttons that are on and off the global cooldown, just for gameplay. But I like that Fellowship is keeping that to a minimum. There are some abilities in Fellowship playing the tank that I really wish were not on the GCD. By the way, I think it's the one like defensive to build up your toughness. I think on the one tank that really feels like that button should be off the GCD, and it's not, and it just drives me crazy.
Yeah, and so like I think that those are things that they'll iron out.
Yeah.
So really, when it comes down to it, Scott, and my feelings towards Fellowship are optimistically positive currently, but there are some glaring issues staring them in the face that they are going to have to solve.
Yeah.
And how they solve those, and if they solve those, are really going to determine the longevity of the game, how it's received, and honestly, the success.
Yeah.
I really think that it's going to come down to those critical issues, like we were saying, with key diversity, the number of heroes, and if they can continue to release content at a relatively acceptable rate for the community, that's going to be whether this game lives or dies, honestly.
Yep. And I look forward to seeing that. Like, I think if you're out there listening, wondering if you should check this game out, if you like Mythic Plus, you should do yourself a favor and check this game out.
100%.
I think even if it ends up not being for you, I think it's worth checking out because it's doing a lot of cool, interesting things. It has a lot of fun ideas. It's obviously taking systems that were built in these other games and seeing what it can do with them. And I'm excited to see what it does. And like we've said many times before, competition is always good. If this game becomes big, then it pressures Blizzard to compete with another system that is like, I mean, you've said in the past, Heaven, there is no such thing as World of Warcraft Mythic Plus that exists anywhere else. There are some things that do kind of a pale imitation of it. But this game mode just does not exist in any other video game. And just the idea that a game could be created that does this game mode that not only allows us to see a different way that it can be done, but forces competition, forces iteration, and forces, everything that happens good when there is competition. Like, it's exciting. So like, I want this game to be popular and successful. If at the very least to A, give me a place to go when I'm bored of a World of Warcraft season, and B, help the game that I love get better.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I will be keeping an eye on it. I don't know if they're going to continue to do open betas or if they're going to go back to doing some closed betas, but it will be something I keep an eye on. And as long as there's no NDA, we might talk about it from time to time whenever that comes back.
Absolutely. Maybe even stream it. I don't know.
Maybe.
How close do you think this game is to being done? That's a good question.
To be honest with you, I think that it's in a state at which it could release and people would play it. I don't think that it is in a state at which the devs would be happy with it releasing yet.
Mm-hmm.
So not very would be my answer.
Do you think they do like an early release that doesn't have all the dungeons and heroes? Like,
I could see them doing early access.
Yeah.
The problem that they're going to run into with doing that, though, is that's going to be an extended period of time at which they're only going to have specific dungeons or specific heroes, most likely, while they still iron out the like core of the systems.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that if they did that, that might actually unintuitively be detrimental to them.
Hey, here's another question. How are they going to get their money?
Cosmetics is my understanding.
So is there going to be a shop?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a cosmetic cash shop.
Okay.
I think that's the thing that you saw, the little mirror thing in the area. I think that is going to be like a cosmetic shop. But that being said, I don't even know that that's true, because currently they have pretty much everything being earned in the game. Like, there's 3 different mounts and you earn those in the game by completing specific things. So maybe it'll be a buy to play model. You buy it once and that's it. But if it's a live service game, I don't know that that's feasible.
Yeah, I mean, they would just have to, like, every new content patch would have to be DLC that they charge money for, I think.
Yeah, or like I said, have a cosmetic shop.
Yeah.
That could sustain them too.
Yeah, I don't know. Watching with very interested eyes, very excited. Happy to see the improvements from alpha to beta. Definitely seems like they took to heart a lot of the feedback they got from that first test that you and I played. All good changes. Nothing that they changed in between those 2 builds that I saw was like, oh no, you've made a worse decision. You've hurt your game. Nothing like that. So yeah, excited to see what this thing ends up doing.
100%. All right, Scott. Well, I think that's pretty much everything that we had for the show.
Yeah.
So I guess the question that I have is, since we do have a dead week, guys, I know this is coming out a little bit later in the week, but what are your plans for this week? Are you going to hang out in Undermine driving around your car? Are you going to go try out Fellowship? Give us an idea on what you guys are planning to do for this week, so that maybe Scott and I can have an idea on what we should do for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
But as always, you can contact us at yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com. YouTube is at yellingintothevoidwow. Twitter is at intothevoidwow. And again, Blue Sky is new, and that is also at intothevoidwow.
And please, folks, if you are not subscribed, you got to do it right now. Season 2 is just around the corner, and we're going to be covering it and having a great time. I've got big goals in Season 2. Big, huge, aggressive, stupid goals. And I want to join you. I want you guys to join me as I try to accomplish them. So I'm really excited for this Mythic Plus season. I think I'm going to push harder in it than I did last season. And we'll see what comes of it. But you don't want to miss it. We're on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else in the world that you can get podcasts.
And then lastly, guys, as always, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting on the YouTube video. All of that gets us more exposure on YouTube, helps us get introduced to new people, and allows us to continue doing what we're doing here. So that's all we have for you guys this week. But until next week, we'll just be over here yelling into the void.